Hi everyone, I hope you're having a good week so far. We're back for another UNSHUSHED talk, and today we're going to be joined by Jacqueline from She Matters United, which is a community also supporting survivors of sexual violence. So we're just going to be waiting for her to join us now in the live, and we're going to be speaking about advocating for survivors' rights and everything to do with that. So, talking more about the reporting process and seeking justice, the justice system. I know Jacqueline is based in Canada, so we'll be talking more on that. And just going to wait for her to join now. Hopefully, it won't be too much longer. Oh. Aha, I can see you. Thanks, Eva. Okay, here we go. Got the request. Hello.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Lovely to meet you. It feels like we've had a lot of chats on the box.
Great
Yeah.
to actually meet.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love what you guys are doing. What time of the day is it there again for you? Is it 2 o'clock?
Yeah, it's two
Yeah,
o'clock.
okay. So it's not. I just did another call earlier and I didn't realize at 9 a.m. there, and I feel like I had too much energy. I was like, no. But yeah, no, thank you obviously for jumping online and connecting with us. I'm super interested to hear more kind of about what you guys are doing. Obviously, I came across your page, or actually, I think you might have followed our page, and then I was like, oh, this page is great. So followed back because obviously we're a platform that's just started supporting survivors of sexual violence, and you're also a platform offering support, advice, and covering content on healing, but also the advocacy side of things, which is something we haven't covered at all. So maybe we could start, if you want to give yourself an introduction. That's probably better than me explaining.
So my name is Jacqueline, and I'm the founder of She Matters and She Matters Co. So we have our nonprofit and our social enterprise, which do very similar things and work very closely hand in hand. But much like you shared, She Matters is really just a community of survivors from around the world who have united in healing and support and advocacy. We're an entirely survivor-led organization. We have a very small team of 4 individuals who help with sort of day-to-day operations of our work, and then also have a team in Kenya that assists with some of our projects there specifically. Um, our, our bases are spread throughout the world, but primarily in Canada, Kenya, US, and UK.
Mm-hmm. Wow, amazing. Oh, yeah, like you're saying, so many different places. And when did you start?
So we officially started off with sort of a fundraiser campaign. I'm also a founder of another nonprofit that's based in Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just started out, yeah, as a campaign itself in my local community here in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And that first event, we very quickly realized that so many members of our community had been affected by sexual violence and very much related to the campaign that we had created, which was called She Matters. So in a period of a few months, this was something that to be a larger entity, and it was pre Me Too resurfacing. So it
Mm-hmm.
was time when there was a lot of community that had been cultivated for survivors, and people just in general weren't talking about sexual violence.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kicked off in September of 2018, and really went into the stages of founding an organization in 2019.
Amazing. What it's interesting journey, and yeah, how everything's like developed. But it's amazing what you guys are doing. It feels like there's so much going on. When I was looking, you've also got your podcast.
Yes.
As well. So I was listening just before jumping online. One of the session you did on understanding your rights, which was a lot. It was a lot of it to take in, but no, super insightful, the content that you're covering there, because I feel yeah, for anybody who might have experienced sexual violence, that whole process, like you say, you know, there's still to this day not many people talking about sexual violence. You know, it's great there's more when you do find the communities or other people in the space, but I feel like it's still you know, it's not a comfortable thing for a lot of people to talk about. And yeah, that whole forcing process, a lot of people wouldn't know what that looked like. So listening to the podcast, even for myself, it was like, wow, that's actually just like how you broke down the different steps and like things to consider. So I thought maybe we could have just like chat through some of those amazing points that you made on the podcast, because I feel like there's a lot of people who might be listening. Yeah, I guess if you wouldn't know those things unless, and then when you're in the moment, obviously it's hard to know what to do. So yeah, maybe we could talk a bit about what that process looks like and the options available.
Yeah, for sure. And full transparency, it is a little bit different everywhere in the world, but largely the sort of steps that go into reporting are very similar, whether you're in Canada, the UK, US, even India. It's relatively similar, and there's only slight differences, really. But at the end of the day, at the root of reporting or choosing to report is that the survivor is in control of the situation. So I always like to start off with, you choose as a survivor whether or not you want to report in the first place, and you choose whether or not you want to file a report with police, whether or not want to go a sexual assault examination kit, whether or not you just medical treatment at the hospital. There are many things that we as just individuals in whatever country you reside in are not aware of when it comes to reporting sexual violence. And so really with that podcast episode, it was in the Canadian context of what survivors' rights are in Canada. We will be diving into an episode specific to the UK and the US in the coming weeks. I'm sort of in the research stage.
Yeah, and I guess it's a lot of research. I mean, even just listening to from Canada point, you know, Canadian point of view, it was so interesting. Things that you just wouldn't like think about, and then yeah, you can tell there's a lot of research that's gone into it.
Yeah, and in all honesty, I never reported, so
yeah,
it's been very insightful for me, and it's been for myself anyway, almost like a therapeutic process just to go through collecting those resources, knowing that if someone is hearing this who's in the process of choosing if they want to report or not, that may help the next individual who's unsure, because that was really at the root of why I never reported. I had no idea how to go about the process, and of course you always worry about whether or not you'll be believed. And there is a lot of comfort in just understanding what your rights are and understanding if something doesn't feel right, to know that actually is not correct. And really the beauty of what we do at She Matters nonprofit side and how that correlates with our social enterprise is that from the social enterprise side, I train medical professionals and police officers on proper procedures for the report process from the lens. and just general consent and things of that nature. So I have two sides that translate to our work at She Matters and educating survivors about what is correct procedure, because that's also my professional background on the social enterprise side.
Yeah, that's definitely like the work that you do social enterprise side as well is so amazing that you're having that conversation and yeah, making those changes and joining the, you know, more transparency and then delivering it on the other side as well to survivors so that they know. One of the things that I picked up on the podcast is protection of identity. So which was something I had no idea about. So yeah, you mentioned obviously talking about how your identity can be protected, because I feel like a lot of survivors, you know, who might have experienced something quite traumatic, to then go and report, there's so many like fears or just fear of the unknown or like what's going to happen when I report. So I think having, yeah, when you talked about protection of identity, that's super important.
And that's something generally that translates through, for the most part, on every front. You can request that your identity be protected. From the Canadian side of things, we actually have a publication ban, meaning that no media source can publish your name.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself is something that a lot of survivors don't know, especially young survivors. And in Canada, specifically, the highest affected population by sexual violence are girls between 15 to 24. Mm-hmm. So, of course, you're worried about finding out what happened to you, people knowing, people blaming you for things. But that's really the beauty of the publication ban, is that your name cannot get out unless you request it to be shared publicly. And the beauty of that as well is that user's name will be published, but not your own. So you can watch of what this individual has been charged with, but your name will never get out there. And that's a protection that I'm hoping will translate globally, because it is such a protection that gives comfort to survivors. And it's really at the heart of why a lot of people don't want to report.
Yeah, and yeah, just knowing that is, because a lot of people just wouldn't know that it, like exactly how you just said, that is one of the reasons why people would choose not to. The fear of people finding out, or people like not believing me, or people, yeah, just having that fear of having the fear of that. But yeah, it was so interesting. And I saw as well, I heard as well, sorry, that you were saying that you can go into different stages of the reporting process, but you don't have, there's no pressure on you to report at any time.
Yes, that's another factor that is a survivor's right. So, for example, you can choose to go get a sexual assault examination kit done at the hospital. And after your kit has been completed, even if the police have to hold on to your kit and store it for you, you don't have to report immediately. I speak to the Canadian side for this, but from what I've read of the, I have it listed here, Victims Code of the UK. I'm reading this morning to start our research. The Victims Code does protect survivors in the sense that you, again, hold the power as to how you're reporting. So you can choose which steps you feel comfortable, which you do not. It also, the Victims Code really is very similar to the Canadian side of reporting. Largely still follow a very UK-based system. So we have a lot of similarities, and it is really your right to decide what you choose to do. And if something doesn't feel comfortable for you at the time, you don't need to proceed with it. We hear that a lot from survivors who want to go to the hospital, for example, but need police to get driven to the hospital for treatment because they don't have transportation. That sometimes they're pressured into then filing a police report when they didn't want to go through justice through the legal system. And so our hope with the podcast is to educate people on their rights. So if ever you are wanting to complete even some aspect of reporting, but you don't want to do another aspect that is usually used in the system for legal justice, you have the right to say no.
And you can report, so you can report via the hospital and via the police, 2 different reporting places in with the Canadian reference.
Yeah, with the Canadian system, and I believe it's similar in the UK, is that you will complete a forensic examination if the assault just occurred. If you have a historic case of sexual violence which hasn't taken place within, typically it's a 72-hour window, then they may not require you to undergo a kit. And if it's been several years, they definitely will not ask you for forensic evidence. Those cases, you would then just proceed to filing a report with police if you were wanting to seek justice through the legal system. If you go through the court process, you have to file a report with police. But the beauty of that as well is that you do have rights even throughout the reporting process. So from the Canadian side, and this is the same in the UK as well, you have a right to information, meaning that when you go to the police and file your report, it is your right to be updated on the process. It is your right to be notified if charges are made. It's your right to get copies of the documentation process and the report that was filed with police. And these are things that survivors often don't know. We hear so frequently that people are being left in the dark and go weeks without any updates, but that is within your rights, as per in Canada called the Victim Bill of Rights, and in the UK it's the Victim Code. So you have the right to that, and that's something that we really try to podcast and just our platform as a whole. Survivors reach out, or if they see anything within our platform, just to educate you that you hold the power in this situation. It's a situation. Reporting in itself makes you often feel very vulnerable, but you really do hold the power when you choose to report.
Yeah, and that information is literally so valuable. Like the fact that you're, helping survivors with that process and giving them, allowing them to get that power for reporting and hopefully justice. I saw as well that you do allow, so if somebody is thinking about calling or reporting, you speak with your survivors as well. So if the people in your community, you can talk to them, tell them prior kind of what to expect.
Definitely. That's a service that we just started offering, and it's something that I will tap into more frequently, to speak to a fellow survivor who has been in court supporting other survivors. Some members of our board have actually been through the court process. And so we provide a lot of insights from a survivor's perspective as to what the process looks like. And for survivors who may also be choosing to go through the court process, who are very apprehensive because they don't really know what's going to happen, that's where it really comes in handy, just to have someone to speak to who can walk you through how to prepare yourself. Something that a lot of people don't necessarily understand when it comes to reporting through courts is that the lawyer that is sort of assigned to your case, representing your case, they're not representing as a survivor. So that's often why we see there's not necessarily like a deep bond between a Crown attorney or a prosecutor. And it's simply because you're a case, you're not a person directly that they're representing, and they're trying to get justice for the case itself. So that's something that we really try to educate survivors on and to prepare them for the court process, because it doesn't always happen that the actual justice system will prepare you for that process. And aware of what type of legal questions may be asked by a defense attorney when you're undergoing that process. And even just, again, access to information that includes the court process, but so frequently we see that survivors are not being provided with updates even when calling in. So at times when you're very vulnerable, if you allow or if you need an advocate in those situations, our team does go in and represent a survey. Say this person has been waiting for however many weeks for information. It is their right as whatever legal code, and need to provide them with this information. And that typically speeds up the process very quick.
Yeah, I mean, and that is, again, such a valuable thing that you're offering to survivors. And I think the whole reporting, and when it does get to find like further stages, it's just so you might already be experiencing going through the emotions, you know, with the trauma itself. I think, and having that extra layer of support that you're providing is just so valuable and so neat.
And even sometimes through the reporting process, if a survivor has just experienced sexual violence, we want that one-to-one session tool to be able to give you the information that you need in order to understand what is about to happen. Should you be going through like a medical evaluation or of that nature? In the coming weeks, we're actually going to be doing a podcast that walks survivors through the actual process of undergoing a sexual assault examination kit. So which steps are taken. We're going to be interviewing a nurse who actually carries out these types of examinations, and then talking about sensitivity during those exams. So if something occurs that makes you feel very uncomfortable, afterwards you can contact Matters, and we'll directly contact the hospital to encourage them to participate in our sensitivity training.
And this is going back to the social enterprise side of things. So it's, you know, you're speaking directly with the survivors about support that you're offering, but then also plugging it in is very much needed into like the legal system, back into like, you know, the other areas. And I saw as well, because you're not government funded, it's obviously a non-profit, so it gives you that unbiased standpoint on everything that you're doing, everything you're talking about, coming from a true survivor like point of view.
Yeah, and the beauty, honestly, of She Matters is that, like, I always share full transparency that this has been an entirely survivor-led nonprofit initiative. To say, we quite literally only got $20 donated last year. Like, that was it. But our organization has still been able to continue because this is survivor run, and for so many of us this is like a very therapeutic process just to be involved in advocacy efforts and cultivate community with fellow survivors. And when we share that with people, when it comes to our advocacy side, they often ask us questions about just sort of bias and things of that nature and being swayed by the government. And that's our response. Like, we have no funding. And we never will. That's something that I've always envisioned for the nonprofit itself, is to bring in donations from companies that share our values or individuals who support our mission. But ultimately, we want to be able to sustain ourselves and our nonprofit work through enterprise. So a percentage of every training that we do goes directly back into the nonprofit efforts. And ultimately, that's how we see our organization continuing on, because we don't ever want to be filtered. We always want to be holding these institutions accountable. And the only way to truly transparently do that is to sustain yourself and remain survivor-led.
Definitely. Gosh, you do so much work. It's so inspiring. No, it's amazing. And the fact that you've done it, like you say, it's the healing. The healing is your own personal healing as well. That's, you know, what we're doing at Shush Box. The reason it started is it's a healing process. It's my healing process. So having community and just like connecting with like-minded people or having these types of conversations, it is about just those conversations and knowing that you're not alone in what you're going through. I mean, the advocacy work as well that you guys are doing is just so great. It's like the additional layer of moving towards a change and really taking into account and listening to obviously your own experiences, but then the community that you've built, and having that ongoing conversation with them to see how you can actually then change the outside world.
Yeah, and so right now, over the last 8 months, we've been working on a massive research study into sexual assault kit accessibility in Canada. We can't share too much because it's releasing sometime in the new year, but we ultimately just saw that there was a fundamental need for things to change. And so we started our own research initiative. We started our own advocacy efforts, and the research that we've been compiling over the last 8 months will be shared publicly in January or February. And really, we hope to continue throughout the future, just primarily focusing on education for survivors on their rights, as well as advocacy efforts. And largely, when I started She Matters, I didn't envision that being a path. But after seeing that there were individuals who are more like called to do the support and healing style work, I realized very quickly that for myself and members of our board, our true passion was just the advocacy elements and educating our peers on what their rights are and walking them through the process of reporting and just the process of finding resources. And that's why I reached out to you immediately, because I know that the healing element is so integral in sort of our journey as survivors. And while we fill one area, which is like the education and advocacy element, there are communities like yours that will fill that void for the healing and support and general sense of community. But there's so much opportunity for cross collaboration in those two realms, because we essentially need each other.
Definitely. And I mean, everything 100%, and everything that you're saying, you know, it's nothing that we've covered. And, you know, even my experience, I would not know where to start. And I just think the passion that you have, and, you know, all the work that you've already been doing, it's so needed. And it does need that time and, you know, that focus, because it's a huge, advocacy is another level, basically. But so important for, what was that, sorry?
That advocacy is a little bit of a beast. It's a process that you also need to be at a certain point in your healing journey to even be able to start to take on advocacy, because it's so triggering when you hear consistently, no, this does not matter, or no, we're not prioritizing this. And so that's why I really strongly support communities like yours that will get people to a point where they'll be able to like just start getting engaged in small bits in advocacy efforts, or just healing as a whole. Like it's a hard process.
It is, and it's so unique to each person. I mean, going back to the advocacy thing, I saw a quote the other day. Where is it? I don't know where I put it. Oh, I know. Okay, so it was somebody posted, "They are all innocent until proven guilty, but not me. I am a liar until proven honest." And I just thought that is just such a sad truth, almost. So the advocacy work is just so important when it comes to justice, and, you know, really changing the narrative and the experience and the whole sexual violence from, you know, on a much bigger level, which is definitely needed.
And what always still to this day blows me away is that it's not a greater focus for most governments and most like medical institutions and police services, because so many people are affected by sexual violence. And I mean, globally, the statistic is 1 in 3 women. 1 in 5 men. So
it's so high. So how is it? This is what I heard. It was 1 in 3 for Canada. I think 1 in 6 for the US. 1 in 5 for the UK. It's almost just like there's so many people affected by it, but yet we're still, the way that society makes survivors feel, it's almost like can't speak about it still, and it's still whole shame and, you know, negative viewpoint on it. So, and then to get to the reporting side, it's, you know, you hear about people going through that experience and being like accused a liar or just not getting far in that process. So of course there's work that needs to be done, and I don't understand how it isn't a bigger focus. So the work that you're doing is so much needed.
And next weekend our organization ordered a sexual assault examination kit, and we're actually going through the process of photographing it, and it's part of our research efforts that are releasing next year. But within that in itself, we're hoping that the global public will really have the opportunity to read our research and just listen to podcasts that talk about specifically that element of reporting, because the process in itself is so incredibly invasive that I'm hoping it will really break down rape culture and changing the narrative that, as you shared, the survivor is lying until proven to be telling the truth. Because no person would choose to go through an invasive process like that. Like no one would choose to do that if they were not telling the truth. And even the statistics of falsely reported cases are so slim. They're between 2 to 10%. Canada and the US. So when you look at that statistic, it really shows that we need to change that narrative. And we've seen that through empowering survivors and not focusing on being a victim. We see a lot more survivors are starting to feel empowered in sharing their stories, empowered in actually calling people out when we witness rape culture in our workplaces or in our homes. And whereas before we may have stayed silent, now we feel empowered to say something. And also power in information as well. So knowing what the statistics are and being able to listen to podcasts or look online and see like such a sense of community and information being shared, it's really starting to shift how the world sees sexual violence.
You're totally right, that whole empowerment. And I do feel, I mean, I don't know if it's just I'm starting to feel empowered, but obviously what built in Shushbox has made me started to feel more empowered. And I hope it is helping to empower people to share stories, or just less of being silent and speaking up, and speaking our truths and owning our narratives and taking back that power, like you say.
And that's really where we want to even shift the narrative in the reporting process, is that you hold the power in this situation. And when you understand what your rights are, you're going to go into reporting feeling like, I know exactly what's going to happen. If it doesn't occur the way that it's supposed to, I can report this institution, and this organization will advocate for me. And this organization will push to have these people properly trained. So we're really hoping that we'll start to see a shift, and we have received reports of insensitivity from survivors around the world, not specific to Canada. And we've conducted training so far in Canada and in Kenya. So we're hoping that survivors will start to feel more encouraged to report cases of insensitivity when they have reported violence, so that we can start to reach out to those departments and ensure that things change for survivors in the future.
And it's so right, like you say, because it's already an unknown area, and you're already have experienced a really traumatic event, then going into that not knowing, not having information, you wouldn't feel as confident. But obviously having a support system like the one you're creating would give survivors that additional layer of support and confidence in the reporting, which is needed. And being able to know your rights is important in that respect, that you can say if something doesn't feel right, or was that allowed, or am I just making this up, or
and a lot of people don't know as well that though it's very discouraged typically by law enforcement and even medical professionals to bring in a friend or an advocate with you. From in Canada, we have a service called Victim Services. I believe there's one similar in the UK as well that works with survivors after they've experienced assault. You have the right to bring a person in with you. It's recommended that you don't, but you do have that right. So that's another key element that we're trying to educate survivors on, is that you have the right to have someone there with you. And if you're being told that you don't, stay firm, because you don't need to go through this alone. You do have someone there.
And that is so valuable, being told that you can't when you can. Of course, that's like having that extra person to help you is needed. So again, knowing this information that you just wouldn't know, it's so valuable. And I saw that you also so there's more that you're doing as well on the advocacy. You also have like online, so going back to the community side of things, you also do like community circles or bi-weekly check-ins and things, and there's other ways that you obviously keep this communication going with survivors as well.
Yeah, we started an online community in September, but we've sort of shifted over the last few weeks to focus that community. It's now a free service, so any survivors can join, and then we essentially have just like a toolbox with more so information and resources that goes a little bit above and beyond what our podcast provides, and include listed counselors that we recommend, parts of the world. And we're going to eventually transition into recommending support communities that are more focused solely on supporting survivors. And that was a decision that I made just over the last few weeks, because our advocacy efforts are so intensive that such a high need, that I realized very quickly you can't do both necessarily if you want to do it right. And
there's so much that you, with the advocacy, I mean, honestly, when I was listening to the podcast, I felt like I had to keep pausing and then going back to listening. I was like, that is like, it's quite clear that you've done a lot of research around the topic. You know, there's so many different parts to be considering, and you know, even like all the things, but even I think you were talking about costs associated with reporting. You know, there's just so much involved with the advocacy side of it, and I think it's so needed as well, like you say.
Yeah, and with the part 2 of the Understanding Your Rights episode from the Canadian context, I did include all of the costs associated to show the need for advocacy, because we know eventually there will be individuals who might not necessarily understand why survivors are making such this big push for equality and protection. But we wanted to show that it's actually the largest cost is that of the survivor. So we have to pay for our own individual counseling services often. We have to pay for maybe time taken off of work after a certain duration of time. A lot of countries now do have temporary support services. We have that in Canada as well, but it only goes to a certain point. And our journey to healing as a survivor is lifelong. So we're always going to need some form of support in moments where we're feeling triggered, and that comes with a financial cost. So it was very important for us to include that in the episode, to also show survivors, hey, we're recognizing what you're going through. We get it. We've all been there.
Yeah.
Know that like we're pushing for the solutions, but also we recognize how much of a toll this has on you.
Yes. You know, even going back, you were breaking down the costs. It's like things that you wouldn't even think about when you broke it down so in all the different places. It is great, the work that you do, and I'm literally in awe of everything that you're doing. It's amazing. So what I know you've mentioned you've got research coming out next year. What else have you got in the pipeline next?
So we're doing our Understanding Your Rights episodes for UK, Kenya, and the US, as those are primary bases where we have survivors who have joined in the community. We're also really strongly advocating for the Canadian government to mandate that sexual assault kits be made available at every Canadian hospital. Currently, our country is facing an accessibility crisis, meaning that there are thousands of survivors who experience sexual assault, go to their local hospitals, and they don't have kits.
So what happens in that scenario?
So in that scenario, you as the survivor are then responsible in most cases to transport yourself to the nearest hospital. If you are like physically injured, you can be transported by police services or ambulance if you have like a physical injury. But often it's the responsibility of the survivor to transport themselves between the smallest distance that we identified was 30 minutes, and that those were in our eastern provinces where they're very tiny. But the longest distance we've identified so far was a community which is quite northern, and they actually had to medevac survivors by helicopter to the mainland to get a kit done.
Oh my gosh. Wow. And that is, again, for somebody going to the hospital already, taking the courage to get there, you get there, there's no kit, that is a massive issue.
Well, exactly. And that was really, when I identified this in 2018, we then went on to actually meet with the Minister of Women and Gender Equality in Canada. And she essentially labeled it as a provincial issue. So not a responsibility of our federal government. Despite me making the direct correlation between access to justice and having forensic evidence, and how if you don't have access to forensic evidence, you're very unlikely to see a conviction, which in our country is already only 3%. So it was very...
This is, I mean, honestly, looking at all the stats, I see why this advocacy work is just needed. You have, when you do the research, start hearing the stats, and everything that you just mentioned, it does make you want to just be like, wake everybody up. Like, why is it that way? Why?
Oh, 100%. I remember I left, so I had to drive 6 hours just to meet with her. It was a very brief meeting, which for me as a survivor was like very, very, not triggering in a sense, but very frustrating. And I remember I left and I was just shaking my head like, did I just imagine that response? Like, was that really what just happened? They're aware that it's an issue, but they don't necessarily care to act. So it really just fueled my fire and the fire of our team. And we started out with our board of directors, which is 4 women. We're all survivors. And then grew to now we have a team of 8. And we've conducted all research as a very small team, all unpaid, all volunteer-led, between survivors and allies. And yeah, it's all going to be releasing next year. But in addition to that, we're starting a campaign in February called Know Your Rights. And the Know Your Rights campaign really taps into what are survivors' rights globally. So we're doing a more in-depth look on survivors' rights in Canada, the US, UK, Kenya. And really, if any survivors from other parts of the world reach out to us, we'll do the same research, put out a podcast episode, give people all of that information more in depth, and then we offer the one-to-one services. So if a survivor is thinking about reporting a historic case or a case which just occurred, we walk them through what to expect and have that reporting tool, which we're uploading onto our website next week, where survivors can just have an easier form to fill in information if they experience insensitivity. And then reach out with our social enterprise, which is officially launching our virtual trainings on the 30th. So
absolutely incredible. I'm so honored to have spoken to you and hear more about what you're doing. Honestly, it is very much needed. I can, you know, it's just so needed and it's so valuable, and it's just great what you've been doing, you and the team, and you know, pace of you and all the progress that you've made so far. And I just know that it's just only going to get bigger. You know, when you do launch your next podcast for the different regions, definitely going to be sharing them. Definitely going to be sharing everything that you're doing. It's just, it is honestly fantastic. And it's, as a survivor, it does make me feel like motivated a little bit. Like now I've got some, I feel like, right, I want to just, yeah, it gives you that confidence, like you say, and that empowering feeling, knowing there's people on your side, having experienced what you're experiencing, and yeah, trying to wake the rest of the world up.
Exactly. That's really at the root. And I spoke with our board about this a few weeks ago, and I said, I think I have found like the actual mission of what I want She Matters to become, and they were completely on board with it. And it's that we're a community where in those moments when you're feeling vulnerable and you're feeling like no one is listening,
yeah,
are there to support you through those times, to educate you on what your rights are, and to step in when your rights have been violated. So that's, and it's a survivor-led initiative. So you just that we're going to go to bat for fellow survivors. And the interesting thing too, whenever I'm educating anyone who's from the institutional elements, so law enforcement, crown attorneys, medical professionals, they often will question feelings or reactions that survivors may have. And it really brings a different angle when you are able to say, as a survivor, I'm going to stop you right there. This is how I personally have felt, and these are the reactions that fellow survivors have expressed through our community. So you stand here and tell me that this doesn't occur.
Yeah, it's evidence-based, like you say, not an abstract, oh, this is perhaps what they could, you know, it could play. No, it's survivor-driven, survivor-led, and yeah, it's really amazing work.
And you as well. I'm so grateful that communities are being established where survivors can feel safe when sharing their stories. And I mean, a few years ago, we really didn't have that. So it's really beautiful to see that now today, survivors who have experienced sexual violence in the past and who will experience sexual violence moving forward in the future will have this safe space that they can go to.
Yeah, that's the aim, isn't it? Just to change the way that society makes survivors feel, has made survivors feel. Not this shame and this, you know, negative feelings or whatever shouldn't be sat with us. It's somewhere else, and we should not have to carry that. And I think connecting with other survivors, finding these communities, yeah, just empowering each other and having these conversations, I think is so important. You're gonna get off now and be like, right, there's just so much, like there are people doing positive things basically, and yeah, it's just so helpful for my healing as well to just speak with survivors. And I think having that connection with other survivors is just, it definitely helps.
It really does. And yeah, as you said, after anytime I speak to a fellow survivor who's doing anything really to support other survivors or support the community, I just always end the call feeling like, okay, I'm ready to work now. So I'm grateful that we've had this call today, because we're kind of in our crunch time for our report writing and getting everything ready for the new year. So this was that my soul needed today.
No, thank you so much. I'll be posting it as well on our page, so anyone who hasn't joined can watch back. And yeah, definitely when you when the next podcast come out as well with the different areas, we'll be sharing that. Again, we're not covering this content. I don't really know any other platforms that are doing what you're doing, so keep up the good work. Yeah, well, it was so lovely speaking with you, and yeah, we'll definitely have to stay connected, and maybe next year once your big report, well, we can see what's new, because I feel like this conversation is one that needs to be, well, from our side, our community, it'd be great to have like a check-in next year as well to see, you know, how things are going. Yeah. Well, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.